Okay, hello everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm actually having some technical difficulties. My camera on my computer isn't working, so you'll have to bear with me as just a voice for now. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mira, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at the Center for Independent Documentary. For those of you who aren't familiar with CID, we're a nonprofit that was formed in 1981, and since then we've been supporting independent filmmakers in a number of ways, including through fiscal sponsorship. So recently we've also started trying to find ways to become more involved with the larger filmmaking community, really with the hopes of being able to help offer resources on a number of topics that seem to be particularly important when it comes to documentaries today. So that's really how these monthly webinars were born. Next month's webinar is actually going to be all about fiscal sponsorship, and CID's very own Executive Director, Susie Walsh, is going to be on hand to answer any questions that people have about what fiscal sponsorship is, when you need a fiscal sponsor, just really how the whole thing works. And we're going to have more details about that in our next newsletter. So if you haven't already signed up for our mailing list on our website, definitely make sure you do that. But now I just want to kick us off by introducing our guest today, Dana Merwin. She is the program officer at the IDA in charge of their grants program. And she's going to be talking with you about some really exciting opportunities that became available this summer. And there will be an opportunity to ask questions after Dana gives a more general overview. At that time, you can type your questions into the chat box and we'll address as many of them as we can. We do ask, though, that you hold your questions until she tells you that she's ready, just to make sure that nobody's distracted by the chat box. And lastly, if you could please make sure that your microphone is muted and your camera is off before we get started, that would be great. We will be recording today's webinar, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording as follow-up afterwards. But for now, I'm going to hand things over to Dana and let her take it from here.
Wonderful. Mira, can you hear me okay?
I can, and I can see you too.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, I want to first off thank Mira and Susie and the CID for having me. It's always exciting to try to find new ways to reach filmmakers, and I think we all have a love-hate relationship with Zoom and web conferencing, but for me, it's really a delight to be able to reach out of just our office. And I think as Mira was saying about CID, I'd love to just give a short intro to those of you who may be unfamiliar with IDA, which is short for the International Documentary Association, which is physically based in Los Angeles. It's a member-supported organization that's over 30 years old. I myself am based in the Bay Area outside of San Francisco, along with the director of the Enterprise Grant, Carrie Lozano. We're the outliers in a good way. But for us, that geographic diversity of being able to talk to filmmakers all over the country is a challenge, because even though we are the International Documentary Association, our resources are small and limited in some ways. So thank you for this opportunity to talk to your members and filmmakers. I'll get started. As Mira said, I look forward to your questions. I don't want this to be just a one-way conversation. We'll open it up in the chat window, but I'll give you a brief overview of some of the exciting stuff that we're doing at IDA. To begin with, the funding element, which I'll talk about today, is just really a new facet of IDA. Many of you probably know it for its programs, its education, its online resources, as well as a very big conference this coming up this September called Getting Real, which is a chance for us to break out of our isolated boxes and editing rooms and the things that come along with documentary filmmaking, which you often feel so isolated. So Getting Real is going to be in September in Los Angeles. It's a great conference that will really connect you with not only funders, but with other filmmakers, with legal experts, and there'll be all kind of amazing programs scheduled during those 2 days. And the schedule will be published this coming August. So that should be very soon, and you'll actually be able to see what's on the lineup. So I encourage you to check that out outside of today's conversation on funding. Let's see. So where to begin? So with many people, they're like, I didn't consider an IDA a funder. And that's fair because only in the past few years have we been administering grants. And I'm going to start with the first one, which many of you are probably more familiar with. It's been around longer, which is the Perilourents grant. And this year there are some changes in that application, so I kind of wanted to highlight them in this webinar. In previous years, it was very open to things about social justice and highlighting issues that were basically very open. And this year, we've been asked to focus on two of the hallmarks of Perilourents, who, if you're unfamiliar with Perilourents, I guess that's kind of a starting point. He was a filmmaker during the 30s, and the two films that really became hallmarks of documentary filmmaking were The Plow That Broke the Plains and The River. Now, The Plow That Broke the Plains was about the Dust Bowl and the farmers that were affected by the drought, and The River was about soil erosion from the Mississippi. Now, you're probably asking, so what we chose to do this year is focus on land and water, really going back to the roots of his first two films. Now, if you're in production or post, those are the two criteria for the production phases for that grant. If you're in development, you're too early. And if you're in finishing, like impact and looking for, if your film is finished, then that's also too late in the production phase. I'm going to take a swallow of water. Pardon me. Thank you. So when we decided this year to kind of tighten the focus on an issue that was a hallmark of Perilourents' films, we chose land or water. So the first question I get is, what does that mean? Does it mean it has to be environmental? Does it mean it has to be about those two films that he first made? The short answer is no. We have a link on our Perilourents website, which I can actually go to now. But we kind of have openly defined that. For us, land could mean urbanization, gentrification, agriculture, land and water rights management, environmental issues as well, even border issues. So when you look at the application and you're trying to decide if your film meets that criteria, we are open. We are open to how you maybe even interpret land or water issues. But that definitely is something new this year. So please consider that. And the other question I'm getting is, well, what if I applied last year or in previous years? Can I apply again? The answer is also yes, but also consider if your issue is related to those two facets. In addition to looking at my notes, in addition to that, the timeline is something I'm often asked about. So the application just opened on June 11th, and I think this is a good time. Let's experiment. You don't have to stare at my face the whole time. Let's go to the shared screen. Ta-da. Great. So it's funny because CID and IDA have a very similar website. They are documentaries.org and we are documentary.org. So I feel a kinship with CID already. If you go to documentary.org and then you go to funding, you will see much of what I'm going to discuss today, but without my wonderful voice. So if you do go to Perilourents and you land on this page, you'll be able to get a brief overview, and then you'll want to just go to the application guidelines, where I'm not going to go into full detail. I've kind of given you a highlight, but for eligibility, you'll be able to review each of those. And then we use Submittable for our grants. So you'll need to join Submittable. It is free. You do not have to be an IDA member. If you'd love to become one, please do. And then there's the checklist, which you can also launch. And we use the core application for all of our grants. For Perilourents and the Enterprise grant, which I'll talk about shortly, they do have supplemental questions, which you'll find at the bottom of the core of the application. So these are things that we just talked about here as well. And so one of the things I think I forgot to mention was the grant range. So the grant range for Perilourents is 15 to 25,000. And we will then, the application is open now through September 1st. And after September 1st, the review period will begin. And we hope to announce the grantees by January 1st, 2019. On that same timeline, I will actually segue to enterprise. You know what? I'm wondering if now is a good time to take questions about Perilourents, now that I think about it. What do you think?
Yeah.
Mira?
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody has questions regarding anything that Dana's said so far, why don't we just type them into the chat box now?
Yeah, I think so, because they are somewhat different, and I think it gets a little confusing to really give you the whole ball, and then maybe it's easier to be more surgical about each grant. I'm looking at my notes to see if I left anything out. Applicants can be both. For Perilourents, this is kind of a huge difference in the two grants. You can be both U.S. or international as an applicant for Perilourents. So that's often good for our international friends. Great. So Tom is asking how many grants are usually awarded through Perilourents per year. Last year for 2017, there were 3 films. So on average, it has been from 3 to 6. And the range can really be from 15 to 25,000 for each film. So it depends. Any other questions on Perilourents? How many submissions? Well, so that'll be interesting for this year. I think you're asking, James is asking, or Greg is asking, or both Greg and James are asking how many submissions. Are you guys asking how many submissions we receive for each round? Last year, it was upwards to, I think, 500. And that is when we did not have the specific land or water criteria. So it's hard for me to say this year what our range will be. But that's a great question. Can the projects be international? So this is a great question, and one that is a little gray as well. So the filmmakers can be both US or international. Now the subject matter traditionally, and one important facet of Perilourents is that it's actually maintained through the New York City Trust. And one of the guidelines that they've given us is that it should be a US issue. Now there has been some gray areas in the past on what that could be. Some films encompass both US and international issues. So we've been able to request kind of a leniency in that criteria, but typically there does need to be some sort of US facet to the story. So it's not a hard line, but it's definitely, the US issue definitely needs to be incorporated in it in some facet for us to be able to make the request to the trust that it applies. Great question. Any other questions on Perilourents? We can all take a water break in between questions.
You know, Dana, we did get one question from a filmmaker prior to the webinar. I can ask you that now, maybe.
Sure.
So the question was, what will kill an IDA grant application faster than anything else?
Kill, wow, that's a strong word. What will kill an application? Not meeting the criteria. What Carrie Lozano and I do together is we go through the checklist. And as simple as that is, some people don't read it. So for this one, this year, if it's not about land or water in any remote way, that's definitely gonna spike it. The other criteria for Perilourents will be, if it's in development, if it's finished, your film can't be finished before December 2018 for this grant cycle. That would not having a current work sample, that's a big one. So Perilourents for this requires a work sample. And a lot of people ask me, like, what makes a great work sample? We always like to say, and also in terms of an application, I feel like it's a kind of a no-brainer to say, have someone else watch it that doesn't know your project, that has no idea what you've been working on for years and years, or you've just started working on, but you've been thinking about it for years and years. And so you know every nook and cranny of the story. We don't. So showing someone an application or work sample and say, does this make sense? Do you have any questions? And if you're getting 2 or 3 people that are confused or have questions, address those, because more than likely we will too. We don't have special powers. We're just like your other, friends and family. So that's a big hallmark to a good application. And having it in your voice and not trying to guess what we want to read or, how we want it to read. If it comes across as your voice, that's a real plus. Does that answer the question?
Definitely. Thank you.
That's a good question. I'll consider that as we think about it more. I like that. Any others on Perilourents? I can move forward and then if you have more along the way, I'll answer them. Yeah, okay. We'll move on. So Perilourents has been administered by IDA for the past few years. The newest one, which is actually how I joined IDA. I like to give a brief history of my involvement. Prior to joining IDA in 2017, I was a production manager with Al Jazeera America, and before that, I was freelance in the film and television world in Los Angeles. So everything from documentaries to independent film and even reality television. I have no skeletons in the closet. I have seen a lot. I've definitely can sympathize with all facets of production and post and all kinds of budgets from tiny to enormous. So both Carrie and I have previous experience in production. And so we're not the people who've always been in the grant world reading grants for millions of years, and we're not burnt out in that respect. So we know what it is to be in your seat. So we both joined IDA when the Enterprise Documentary Fund was created, which was in 2017. The MacArthur Foundation is the major supporter and creator of that grant. They gave Enterprise $1 million for 4 years, starting in 2017, to then every year give at least 10 films that are in production up to 100,000, and then to give approximately 10 films that are in development up to 15,000. And so that was also created in the effort to help integrate the conversation that was happening between documentary filmmakers and journalists. And I won't spend a long time on this. This is a whole panel that you can probably see it getting real. But there is a stigma sometimes about documentary filmmakers calling themselves journalists or saying, I didn't go to journalism school, I'm not a journalist. And this grant was really to say, but you're probably doing similar things. Or if you're not, here's some other skills that you don't have to go to journalism school to, that the grant will help facilitate and help broaden your skill set for the film that you're making. And the very first question we got was, well, what are journalistic practices? Like, how do you define that? Well, it can be very broad, but a lot of the things that seem less intimidating that we like to share are public records, how to access those, research, any legal protection that you need for your sources or even for your digital media, entering hostile environments. These are all things that major networks, from my experience even with Al Jazeera, we were at a network where we could walk down the hall and have access to all of these, LexisNexis and all kinds of research tools that have subscriptions and costs associated with them, were available if you were working at a network. Well, as we know, more and more people had the ability to make films without being at a major media network, but you were still needing the same resources. So this is the emergence of the Enterprise Grant, was to really help facilitate documentary filmmakers who didn't know what they didn't know and what they could actually really benefit from in terms of having more journalistic practices and credentials. So like I said, that's a whole wonderful, lovely conversation to continue, but we like to introduce that so that you're not intimidated by the application for Enterprise. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm not doing a frontline piece. I'm not going undercover with cameras. That's okay. You can look at our inaugural year of grantees, which are on our website as well, and you'll see a definite range. There are some films about whistleblowers in the New York City Police Department. Crime and Punishment is currently on the festival circuit. And then there's another film called Made in Boise, which is still in production, which is about surrogate mothers in Boise, Idaho. So the range there, I feel like, is a great spectrum to show. In terms of the production grant, which I'll lead with, which has awards up to 100K, your film must be in production. You must be a mid-career level filmmaker. And this is another thing where people are like, why? Well, there's a lot of grants out there for emerging filmmakers, and MacArthur and IDA discussed supporting that mid-career filmmaker for this grant. So you have to have completed 2 feature films and been either the director or the producer on those. And so either one can apply. And like, if you are a first-time director, as long as you have someone on your creative team that meets that criteria. The other thing about Enterprise is that the production grant is currently closed. So for those of you who are hearing about it for the first time and getting very excited, this is where I play the sad trombone. And the application was open from January 1st to April 1st. And so we are currently in the review process. Now, for those of you who may have applied, and your other question is, what's the timeline? When will I be notified? You will be notified actually in the next coming weeks. By mid-August, we'll have contacted everyone, and then there'll be a big announcement in September at Getting Real with all of our grantees. The next round will open, for those of you who were hearing the sad trombone, the next round will open January 2019. So mark your calendars, but if you go to the website now, the criteria will not change. So you can at least understand the criteria and get a sense of what the grant is. Let's go to the website, because I'm sure you're tired of looking at me for a little while. 1 second. Okay. So if you go to documentary.org and you go to funding, you can go to the enterprise.fund homepage and read a wonderful article that Carrie Lozano, our director, wrote that will give you more in-depth kind of knowledge of why the grant was created, and that bigger conversation that I was alluding to about journalism and documentary filmmaking. Really recommend it. Highly good read. So as you'll see, the production grant is closed right now, but as we segue, I'm going to take a quick swig of water. I know this was called Lunch and Learn. For me, it's more drink and learn. Here we go, development. So the application that is currently open is the development grant, which has a completely different set of eligibility requirements. Whereas the production grant is for with 2 credit filmmaker credits, this is open to at least an applicant must have a proven track record working in documentary film, features, or shorts. But directing one is not necessary. What that means is maybe you were an editor, maybe you were an associate producer, But this is your chance to bring your amazing story and show that you're an emerging filmmaker. This is the difference between the Enterprise Fund and Perilourents. Unfortunately, all the applicants for an Enterprise grant must be U.S. citizen or permanent resident. So that is something to keep in mind. The other thing that I get a lot of questions about is how do you define research and development? So if you're in significant production, you're not eligible. It's also a gray area, right? We want to, the biggest thing Carrie and I like to say is this fund wants to be seed money. It's $15,000, but it can go towards making that trailer that will help you raise more funds. It can go to shooting. So it's not that it has to be research or development. It can mean like, I need to do a 5-day shoot in Florida and go get the footage. And then I can create a teaser that creates more opportunities for funding. And for this application, that's the only budget that we need to see. We ask for a line item budget that shows 5 days for the $15,000 and then lay out how those expenses, how you anticipate those expenses and the need for the grant. The subject can be domestic or international. So that's also a good thing to know. And then the big difference between this and all of our grants is that it's anything under the sun. You can be a short, you can be a feature, you can be a series, VR, other emerging documentary film format. So that's really exciting for us. We're excited to see new things. We love, I think the other question I get is, oh, well, this journalism thing, you know, does that mean it can't be more avant-garde or more artistic? And the question is, the answer is absolutely. We want to see unique voices. We want to see unique artists. Filmmakers are artists, and we appreciate that element of it. The rest of this you guys can go over. There is a similar core application with one supplemental question that you'll find in the core application. And you'll use submittable as well. This application also, like Perilourents, closes September 1st, and the timeline is very similar. You'll find out by January 1st if you receive a grant. And I think now is a good time to also open for questions. Okay, and here they are. From Joanne. What about journalists who have become independent filmmakers? Do we have a chance to get the Enterprise grant? Yes. The question will be for you is if you haven't made a film before, you will need to partner with a creative producer who does have the 2 film criteria if you were doing the production. If you're doing the development grant, the chances are the criteria is more open for you. So you don't necessarily need that. Does it help to have a team in mind to show that you'll be able to, you know, have some help on that? Yes, but it definitely doesn't disqualify you in this instance for the development one. Did that help? Did that make sense? Let's see, Joanne also asked, does producing docs for television news count as experience? I met all the Enterprise for that one. If we're still talking about the development one, yes, because that shows you have a track record, and that's fine. For the production, not so much. Betsy asked, for the IDA Documentary Fund, I'm American but based in Italy. Our executive producer is based in New York. My background is narrative, but he has produced a documentary short in the past. Would we be eligible to apply through him for development funding? Yes. Yes, you would. Yeah, absolutely. That completely makes sense. You're welcome. Any other questions about Enterprise or Perilourents? Kind of the barn doors are open now. And while you're maybe typing questions, the other thing for Enterprise, one more question before I segue. CM says, for Enterprise, do you want a sample? Ah, thank you. I almost forgot that. For the development fund, you are not required to have a current work sample. That's how brave and bold we want to be. We don't require one. If you have one, great. Don't spend a lot of time or resources on it, but we'd love to see. If you have characters, those are always great to see in a work sample, but it does not disqualify you. So a current work sample is not required. The follow-up question for, oh wait, not a follow-up. This was from Catherine. What about the gray line between development and early production if you're shooting without a DP until budget money comes in? I think that's a great question, because I've definitely been to some works in progress panels where a director is showing a piece and they're getting notes to like, find a DP, find the sound person. Well, yes, when you get funding, you'll definitely do that. Yes, I find like one of the things that we do ask for is to frame it, right? So if you were submitting that footage, then you could give us context and say, this is probably you gaining trust with your source, or this is, you finding out how the character is on screen. All of those things, you can give us context. If you had said, this is 5 days out of my 25-day shoot, that seems like it's starting to qualify towards your principal photography. So just give us some context, in terms of where you are in your development stage. So I think that hopefully that helps. Yeah, we definitely can appreciate it when you're the one-woman band out there, doing the lion's share. And that usually is a pretty red flag that it's in development. Yes, you're welcome. And one of the things that maybe I always find like it's maybe the last thing to talk about in terms of especially the enterprise website or the IDA website. Only recently, in the past few months, have we had this. But if you're like, Dana, you're killing me. I don't qualify for Perilourents. I don't qualify for development. I don't qualify for production. I'm about to log off of this webinar. If you leave with one thing today, other than knowing about IDA a little more, go to the website, go to funding, and then scroll down to other grants. And these aren't grants that are administered by IDA, but what it is our amazing IT web communications person, Suze, has created a directory through Airtable. And I'm not going to go through it now. That's a whole other thing. But you can start searching. This is just a how-to, but you can start searching through all of the other grants that don't exist through, and I just realized I didn't share my screen as I was doing that. That was not great on me. Hold on one second. Here, now we're sharing the screen, Dana. So if you go to documentary.org and then go to funding and then go to other grants, this is going to link you to a program we are using called Airtable that you can then search and filter and look for any grant that may help you in your project, because there's so many grants out there. If you're doing a film on the circus, you may want to type in circus and realize that there are grants just for circus. Maybe you're doing it, whatever subject matter. This is so helpful and is very user-friendly. In the past, I think you had to print it out and like search and circle. And this now you can do all online. Okay, more questions. Our project is 15% shot. Still need to expand our relationships to the subject and dig in deeper. Producer has one completed feature. Director has many shorts, but no features. Both have very deep journalistic backgrounds, but we will not be undertaking any of the journalistic requirements you noted. We seem to be falling between. Help. I don't know if I would disqualify the journalistic requirements. I can't really, I want to answer as many questions as possible. And I think we were talking about doing this at the end. I'm happy to share our email address, which is grants@documentary.org, and we'll post that in Mira was going to send that out to y'all after. But 15% shot, I mean, it sounds like for the development, I just want to know more about it. I wouldn't disqualify you. We also say in general, if you feel like you're really sure about most of the criteria, then apply. If you find yourself, second guessing some things, drop me an email. But if it does seem to be, like if you're not sure about journalist requirements, read Carrie's blog, because I didn't go too in depth into what that could mean. Read the blog that I pointed out on the website, and you may find that you may need more than you realize. So, and when I say that, the other thing about enterprise, which I neglected to talk about, is that we do have resources outside of just the monetary grant. We have partnerships with the UCLA Documentary Law Clinic, which is going to, for all of our grantees, they will help review contracts and help with any other legal questions that our grantees have, which we know is a huge resource because lawyers aren't cheap. So we're really excited about that partnership. We also had a partnership with the Reporters Committee, and they reviewed a lot of the First Amendment issues for our grantees. And then we have a partnership with FIRE, which is Freelance Investigative Reporters and Editors, and they've done a lot of fact-checking. So fact-checking is a part of journalism. If you're interviewing a subject and they're only giving their side of the story, what are you doing? Even if you're an advocacy film, that's okay. Advocacy films can apply. But in your production, when your person is telling their side of the story, what are you doing to hear the other side of the story? Even, are you approaching it? Are you researching it? Are you interviewing them? Those are all journalistic practices. So happy to maybe answer some more questions offline, David. Susie, what is the best way for filmmakers to interact with you? Email or call? That's a tough one. There's always time zone issues. I would say email. Like I said, I can't pre-review your application, but if you have a very specific question about the criteria, credits, or subject matter, especially for Perilourents right now, email is probably the best. So grants@documentary.org. And give me a day or two. I try to go through my emails pretty regularly every day. But we do travel. We try to get out and travel some too to other festivals. Betsy, the development fund with the September deadline, how long is the review process and when do grants award? So both the development fund and the Perilourents are on the same timeline. They'll close September 1, and the review process will go until December, and that's when finalists will be notified, and then they'll be announced publicly in January. Last year we announced them during Sundance. Any other questions? None.
Dana, I don't know if maybe you want to take this chance to talk. I know Getting Real is coming up. If you had anything else that you wanted to share about the conference.
It's a little, yes and no, in that the schedule isn't published yet. So it's hard for me to really tease some of the people that are going to be there and really talk about the schedule. So I feel like it's a little too early, other than if you want to take a leap of faith and buy your tickets now and know that it's going to be awesome. I definitely would love to send y'all information once the schedule is published, and that may tip the scales for some people who are considering whether to make the trip if they're not based in LA, because I know, it takes a lot to travel and get out there. So go to our website. There's definitely going to be more announcements in the coming weeks on Getting Real and the schedule.
Cool.
Yeah.
Looks like we have some more questions.
Let's see. What will happen? Let's see. I think I missed. Where did we end up? Betsy. So if we apply as we are in development, but by the time it ends, oh, I get this one a lot. So if we apply as we are in development, but by the time the awards are announced, we're in production, can we reimburse out-of-pocket development costs we have incurred? For the development fund, so for the production fund, we actually say you cannot reimburse for previous expenses. Typically, we're not supposed to reimburse for either fund, but I would say still apply. It's kind of like sometimes your timeline will shift, and you'll probably have even more things associated with the development. We're not too big of sticklers on that. What we'll do is we will contact you. If you make a finalist round, we contact all of the finalists to see where they are in their phase of production or development. And so that will inform it a lot. So my overall recommendation to anyone applying is don't overthink your timeline too much. Definitely don't, fudge it to make it make sense with, oh, well, the grant's being awarded in September, I should tell them my timeline is this. We'll contact you and we'll talk through it and see what, where you are. I would say just be, true to whatever you're trying to do, because Murphy's Law does happen, and you think that you'll have that person for a week to shoot with, and then they'll tell you they're, not available. So I would say apply with your current timeline, and then we would contact you as a finalist to see where you are. Susie asked, what will happen at the end of the 4-year time for the Enterprise Fund? We hope MacArthur will want to continue to support filmmakers, and that they will renew that commitment. But at this point, we are only guaranteed the 4-year doc fund with MacArthur. And the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation has also given a generous support towards the Enterprise Fund. We had 2 grantees announced recently through their support. It was through nomination only, but it was they're called Elevate grantees, and those 2 grantees are also listed. Those are for women filmmakers of color. So the Jonathan Logan Foundation supported Enterprise through that kind of sub-grant. I wasn't speaking about it today because its first year was for nominations only. So hopefully at the end of 4 years, we'll have more support. So from David, development grant, Perilourents, and the Enterprise seem like 3 grants, 2 of which have deadlines in September. Sorry, I'm confused. It's okay, David. I talk fast, and sometimes it's confusing. So yes, you could look at it as this. Enterprise has 2 grants, a production grant and a development grant. The production grant is closed. It will open in January of next year. Feel free to go to the website and take a look at it. The Enterprise Development Fund is open now and closes September 1st. Separately, Perilourents is open now and closes September 1st. Unfortunately, you would have to fill out 2 separate applications. If you were filling out one for development for Enterprise, chances are you probably don't qualify for Perilourents, because Perilourents is for films that are in production or post and not development. So it's kind of one or the other right now with the 2 grants that we have open. Did that make sense, Mira? Hopefully. David says thanks. Okay, good. James, will Getting Real include pitching or meeting with broadcasters and distributors? I don't know. We have 2 of my colleagues, Claire Aguilera and Renelle Schubert, are the masterminds behind that schedule right now. So it is currently not my circus to be in the scheduling right now. So please keep an eye on the website, and hopefully they'll publish the schedule soon. Good question. Anyone else? All right, y'all have been a very attentive audience for 45 minutes. Let's see, Cheryl, could personal docs be considered for Enterprise? It's a great question. There's actually 2 things that I would bring up on the heels of that. Yes, a personal doc could be absolutely considered. So yes, I would say, especially if it's, focused on a contemporary issue. So if you wanted to email me separately, we could talk about that. And then also to have some sort of, journalistic integrity to it, or practice. So maybe, like I said, read the blog with Carrie and consider those two options. But yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we are very supportive of, different artistic approaches to the format. And then a lot of times we get applications that are historical in nature, or asked if it can be a biography, or can it be historical? Yes, but it still needs to have some contemporary relevance. So if it is a doc on Martin Luther King, what is the present day connection and significance to that story? So that's kind of the short answer to that, if you have either one of those projects. Greg asked, how is the core application project going? I think if I understand your question, it's been very beneficial for us, and I know that other festivals are starting to adopt it. I've even recently gotten other questions from festivals asking, they were starting to adapt it. And for those of you who may be completely unfamiliar with the core application, it was a previously when you had to fill out all these festival and grant applications, and to some extent you still do, they were all very different. And IDA collaborated with Sundance and other organizations to create just one format, so you wouldn't have to answer random questions for all of these organizations. So for us, and now, we still do add a supplemental question or two, but for the main purposes, if you have filled out an application for a Sundance grant, then you can, 99% of that application can go over to one of these grants, just with the addition of the supplementals. So yes, we're quite happy with it. Hopefully you guys are too. We listen to you, so we're trying to service, what makes life easier for y'all. So I'd almost throw it back to y'all and say, is it working for y'all in terms of all your applications? Joanne asked, getting real sounds great, but if we can't get to LA, how about a meet and greet or pre-event in Chicago, perhaps in August? That sounds like an invitation, Joanne. If you want to, it sounds like you want to host, we'd love to come. But all joking aside, what we're trying to do is expand one facet that we're trying to do is expand member mingles. If you are an IDA member, then you would see our newsletter, and you get a specific newsletter if you're a member. And we're definitely trying to plan other events outside and just for the community, not necessarily education or programming, but just a way to network at a small venue. So those are starting to expand. Definitely goes back to the size and the resources that we have. We do have an education and program department that tries to reach out. And I know, especially in Chicago, we were recently I recently attended Columbia, the True False Film Festival. And we had a great meeting called Heartlandia, where filmmakers from around the Midwest gathered at the True False Film Festival. And we discussed issues as sustainability and networking and just in general, the state of the field. So we do try to have those events outside of the coast. And we do have some partners there that we're trying to strengthen those opportunities to do more programming, more networking, because we understand it is a very isolating operation often. David says Common Core has been very, very helpful. We're happy to hear that. Betsy, in theory, we love the core application, and yet there seem to be diverse word or character requirements for the same questions between diverse funders. Often the same question requires multiple rewrites to fit the technical requirements. Interesting. Maybe we can sidebar on that. I'd love to drop me an email. I'd love to maybe hear more about that. We won't deep dive into the time we have today, but that's great to hear. Yeah, thanks. Anyone else?
So everyone, this is Mira again, and I just wanted to reiterate
that we will be sending out follow-up after this webinar. So if Dana has any links or email addresses that she would like me to share, I'll make sure that all gets to you. And Dana, thank you so much again for all of this today. This has been so, so great.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. You've all had really great questions, and I'm sure tonight, right before you go to sleep, you may think of another one, and that's when you can email me. And like I said, we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. But my parting thought is that if in general you think you meet all of the criteria, you can email me, but I'm probably going to say apply because I'm not the gatekeeper. And even if I'm like not quite sure, I'm going to say apply because I would rather have other reviewers take a look at your project than me be the, you know, the all end all on it. So please shoot me a question if you need, but if you think you're mostly there, then I'd say apply because it doesn't cost anything. And hopefully you've already done the core application without too many tweaks, and you know it's worth your time to apply.
Great. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Dana, and thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right. Bye.